Cover Killer Nation, with each passing album review that is done, there are many questions that need to be asked and many answers that need to be discovered. And there is no album, perhaps, this year that has to have more questions asked and answered and have more storylines really, I guess, played out and laid to rest than the album review that we're going to do today. Now, the album that we're going to do is RIITIIR, or RIITIIR, however you wish to pronounce it, by the band Enslaved. The name itself is a amalgamation, a combination of the words rites and rituals. Now, why are there so many questions and so many storylines that there need to be answered? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in 2010, Enslaved won the Album of the Year award for their last release, Axome Ethica Odine. And of course, one of the biggest things that you need to think about whenever you're an album reviewer and whenever you're constructing lists of that nature is, well, can they do it again? Well, here in 2012, as we've already been able to document through the various album reviews that have been done throughout the first 9 months, now going into the 10th month of this year, they have a lot of competition that they're going to have to really rise above in order for that to occur, including the first 10 out of 10 in this channel's history back in June with the new Creator album, Phantom Antichrist. So, were Enslaved able to rise up to the challenge and beckon the call and do that? Well, it was going to be tough. However, this album also has a lot of progression, not to mention a lot of an extension of their already experimental nature that has been going on now for over a decade plus with this band that occurred on this album. This album seems as though it was the release in which the clean vocal was going to become even more dominant. And now this is something that has happened more and more often on subsequent releases. However, there are some where it's a little bit more heavy on the cleans than others. This is a band in Enslaved that is able to do what many bands, I think, sometimes wish that they could do. And that's offer that blend of cleans and harsh vocals in the environment that they traditionally have been able to push the boundaries of in black metal, now turning it into progressive black metal or just flat-out progressive weird metal. And truly have a balance, to have that harmony, to have that yin and yang at your disposal, to a degree that it never becomes boring. Once again, Enslaved has been able to find that perfect balance, and it really is starting to become something to really marvel at what they've been able to accomplish within the past decade and a half. Not saying that the first part of their career was any slouch either, because whenever they were doing pure black metal, that was fantastic too. Really, ever since their inception point, this band's been a cut above the rest, including the Viking metal side of that as well. I don't want to leave that out because I know someone's going to remind me about it. But at any rate, on this album you hear more of a percentage going toward the 50% mark for the clean vocals. Now for some people this is going to be off-putting. It's going to be something that's going to cause them to maybe dismiss this album. But whenever you listen to the harmonies, whenever you listen to the musicianship, the songcraft that occurs on this record, then you start to understand why the clean vocals are almost necessary in a lot of these moments, because it is really just what demands it. It is really what makes the most musical sense. Not to mention, the cleans are just getting better and better. And we knew going in that Enslaved's clean vocals were definitely suitable. But on this album, since they had to be used and called upon a little bit more, they had to be extra good, and they were. This album spans about 67 minutes in length and is 8 tracks long, so once again, we're dealing with a lengthy release. Nothing new, I know, but at the same period of time, this album does not feel like it's 67 minutes in length. It really doesn't. The time just screams by, and that's the mark of a great album also. Whenever the album is longer than, your traditional limitations. For me, typically, an album should be probably anywhere between 40 and 55 minutes. Anything that's a little bit longer than that tends to overbear itself, kind of weighs itself down. Anything shorter than that, and it's really kind of under threat of underrepresenting itself or being too wham bam thank you ma'am that it leaves me thirsting for more. So with 67 minutes, it was kind of going over the top a little bit and kind of putting itself in jeopardy of being part of that overexposure or overstaying your welcome idea, and it really doesn't do that. This plays like a 45-minute long album. It really does. It just feels like the time is sort of flying around you, and time and space has you just enveloped in this album, and it's very difficult to tear away from it, and that's something that is another positive of this release, is that it keeps you constantly involved. Now, some people may argue that the middle portion of this record can get a little slow at portions, and the latter two tracks on this album maybe aren't as good, but I really think that the atmospheric build-up that these tracks are able to really represent is something that is absolutely key, very essential for the overall body of this release. We all know what Thoughts Like Hammers sound like. We've all heard that, hopefully, by now, and we know that this was something that was just dug up from the gallows of 70s prog and space rock that's thrust into the Viking/black metal, prog metal environments that Enslaved have been given to us for the past decade and a half, and it really just kind of combined together to give us this soaring experience that gave us extremely high hopes for this album. And I'm here to tell you that Thoughts Like Hammers certainly ushered in what was going to be experienced with this album, with this release. The first half of this album is just incredible. It is a fantastic, fantastic thrill ride, and it just really kind of bends you in so many different directions and really showcases each and every niche of music that Enslaved are able to incorporate into their own sound. Not to mention, they're throwing in a couple of new tricks as well, which is something that every band needs to do with subsequent releases. It has to have a little bit of a familiarity to it, but at the same time, it also has to add some new tricks to the trick bag. It needs to offer some new maneuvers whenever you're on the course. It's just something that is essential in order to keep a band not only good, but also to keep them fresh. Many albums can sound just like their predecessor, but definitely sound weaker because it's something that's already been done before. Well, with this album, it's definitely not at all a tale of two halves. I know I mentioned the first half, and I know I mentioned that some people may be a little bit dissuaded by the second half, but I feel that the second half, for those atmospheric reasons, really holds its own in its own right. It's not so much that these two halves really feel like night and day to one another, because they really do not. There is an amazing flow to this release. However, the one thing is that these are all supposed to flow on an individual level. Each of these 8 tracks are supposed to flow as its own entity, as opposed to it being a flow to either a concept album or something that has an underlying theme. This is introspective thought, once again, and it is something that is really one of the bright spots of heavy metal. If you are a thinker and you're not listening to metal, some people, myself included, will probably ask you, what the fuck are you waiting for? This is one of those albums where I would say that, because it has a lot of poignant lyrics to it. It has just terrific songcraft. The harmonies of the clean vocals are terrific, and overall, like I said, whenever an album flows and feels like about 22 minutes shorter than it actually is, where you're actually spending more time on this album than you actually expected to, yeah, those are a lot of good aspects. Now here's the thing. I don't believe that this album is the album of the year. It's really hard for me to say, but Enslaved I don't think will be repeating as album of the year winner with 2 subsequent albums. I'm still searching for that to happen. But that's not to say that this isn't a damn good release, because it certainly is. It's extremely solid. I really enjoyed this experience, and the increased heightened usage of the clean vocals to me is just music to my ears. I'm wearing an Opeth shirt, so obviously a lot of people had some wayward opinions about Heritage, even though that was all clean, but we all knew what Mike sounded like. We all know what Enslaved sound like with their clean vocals. We all know what to expect, but at the same time, with this heightened usage of it, we got a new side to them, and it is definitely one that is very well received. 9.25 to 9.5 out of 10. I really can't decide on a score after listening to this album. God, I don't even know how many times already, but it's been a few. So this is an album where if you didn't get it the first time, it's going to be a grower for you, but it's definitely going to grow on you. If it's something where the first time you heard it, you absolutely found it to be terrific, then you've already got it. And to clarify, there's nothing really to get. It's just one of those things where sometimes albums have to reveal themselves after multiple listens as opposed to after just one. It's the reason why you should really listen to things multiple times prior to, either talking about it or, just understanding or thinking that you understand them. Yeah, I know a lot of people are thinking that's a pot shot that's directed towards myself, but a lot of people don't know me. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, definitely check out RIITIIR, however you wish to pronounce it, by Enslaved. Definitely a terrific album, and it's going to open up a fantastic month here in October in 2012 that we're only getting started to talk about. Take care, guys.